It started out ordinary enough, leaving Kodiak with everybody else, and high hopes and extra person on board in the form of a photographer who wanted just some casual halibut pictures, and ended up documenting one of the most dramatic trips I have ever seen. Thinking back, it was pretty serious. We were lucky. Any less a boat, I think, might have had some real serious problems.
The only place to clean fish was kneeling on the hatch, and it was just water all over. When the checkerboards floated away, then the boat started listing, and then it just kind of kept adding. The boat kept getting worse and worse because the water wasn't able to drain off.
I just kept thinking, well, okay, we're not in too bad a shape now. We just have a few more skates to go. Just a few more skates to go.
Well, the rest of us were trying to figure out exactly what to do, and we were trying to move the gear to right the boat, and nothing was working, and it just kept getting worse and worse.
I thought we could get that set in, and it'll still be okay, but it all happened so fast that the weather kicked up within an hour, and fish piled up on deck, and the scuppers weren't draining, and it was all happening at once. And by that time our reaction time was a little long.
Mm-hmm. Probably about 10,000 pounds we lost from on the deck.
It's all these things kind of adding up to the pressure just to get the gear in. Just keep going, keep things rolling however you can, and get the gear in. And you got this big weight over your head, it's just noon, and everything's got to be done by noon.
Longlining off Alaska was once a lonely business. Day after day, year after year, for almost a century, classic schooners fished the open ocean far from shore. But rising fish prices over the past decades brought more and more boats, and then even more. Soon the grounds became crowded, and quotas were harvested in less and less time. To protect fish stocks, seasons were cut from months to weeks, and finally days. Now, frenzied 24-hour derbies pit fishermen against fishermen in the race for fish. Longlining off Alaska has become one of the most dangerous occupations in the nation.
We've had some deaths. The Sarah Maria boat that ran into the coast down here at the south end of Baranoff Island. They'd never been fishing out there in September in the middle of the night, in the middle of a storm. But they were because of the management system.
This film, produced by the Alaska Longline Fishermen's Association, focuses on the problems and the proposed solutions to the halibut and sablefish derbies. The film is about the fishermen, the resource, and the people who manage it.
When I got involved in this issue, my main concern was that I felt that here was something that was going to happen to the fishermen and the people of the state of Alaska that was the most critical thing to happen to fisheries since the Magnuson Act. And if you talk to any 10 fishermen, they didn't even know what it was. They didn't know what IFQ stood for. Here was something that was so important, so critical to the economic survival of this community and many of the communities like Sitka up and down the coast, and the people that were going to be most affected were as ignorant as the milkman.
December 1991. On a 7-4 vote, the North Pacific Fishery Management Council approved a controversial management plan for the Alaska halibut and sablefish fisheries. If accepted by the Department of Commerce, this plan will allocate harvest rights for a percentage of the total quota to individual fishermen. These harvest rights, called Individual Fishing Quotas, or IFQs, will be based on the fisherman's history in the fisheries. IFQs will be transferable between fishermen. Any fisherman not receiving an initial quota allocation will have to buy quota in order to fish. Fishermen can harvest their quota shares any time during a 6 to 9 month season. IFQs are a departure from traditional fisheries management, replacing the competitive derbies with limited access and controlled harvest. According to some fishermen, IFQs will restore a traditional lifestyle. According to others, IFQs will close the door on an American dream.
We choose to live here in Alaska because of this lifestyle. We choose to raise our families in Alaska. We choose to be fishermen because of the lifestyle. And it all goes together. And there is nobody with his kids on a boat in a 24-hour derby hardly anymore. And so, you know, the family part of the fishing lifestyle is going to be deleted. It's going to be left out someplace with the IFQ program, or you know, something along that line. Well, then a family can work together.
The only thing I ask for is a chance, same chance as everybody else, and this IFQ doesn't give me the same chance everybody else had to go fishing. And what made America great in the past is people were treated equally.
The halibut derbies are exciting, a last vestige of the gold rush. But what toll are the derbies taking on the resource?
And I don't think that there's a biological need for the plan, for the IFQ plan. The resource is healthy, both blackcod and halibut. The spawning biomass, according to the International Halibut Commission, is the third highest it's been in the last 60 years, last year.
Some people are saying that the resource isn't hurt, but this is just a fallacy. You know, we're wasting. We're throwing away millions of pounds every year. We're cluttering the bottom with non-biodegradable gear. And, you know, everybody's fishing as fast as they can and horning off the little ones. Or a lot of people are, and they're being damaged. And everybody's setting more gear than they can retrieve in a reasonable amount of time, and they're losing it by getting it tangled up with other people. The bycatch that they land after the gear's been in the water a couple days is dead. It's a nightmare. It's unbelievable.
The estimated gear loss in waters off Alaska is roughly 5% in one of these derby-type 24-hour openings. Now, an interesting comparison is to compare it with 2B, which is British Columbia, which has a closed access system. There are 435 boats participating in an individual vessel quota system. Their gear loss is less than 1%. In percentage terms, the dead loss in Alaska is about 5.5% of the commercial catch, and it's less than 1% of the commercial catch in British Columbia.
The council estimates $2 to $3 million a year worth of gear is being lost and left on the bottom. We never used to lose any gear. We'd never lose any gear. We'd wear our gear out. If we lost it, we'd drag it up again.
It's unbelievable. As longliners, we've always felt that we've had a very selective, very clean fishery, and in the past we have. And now, because of this tremendous, unbelievable overcrowding on the grounds, we're running into a major bycatch problem that's giving us a bad reputation, that's shutting other longline fisheries down.
Okay, I don't believe that we really have adequate accounting of dead loss for any of the species halibut, sablefish, or rockfish.
While fishermen agonize over the waste out on the fishing grounds, processors struggle with the glut of fish dumped on the docks after the derby closes.
On a 24-hour opening of halibut, let's say, it takes up to 3 weeks to process this fish. And boy, if it wasn't handled properly or clean when it was out there, it really shows up. And our abilities to handle that kind of volume is we just can't do it. We do it, but it's not helping anybody at all.
I was in Massachusetts. I spent a month down there last winter with friends. Of course, you know, we run around the fish market once in a while and see what kind of Alaska products. And they like halibut. Those people back there, you know, amazingly, those Massachusetts farmers are basically the same as us, and they're great fish eaters. You know, they like that. And when Alaska halibut comes on the market, they're right down there paying the $7-8 a pound. The halibut, there's about that color, and it's all dry. I know we can do better than that.
Over the past 10 years, the Council has received testimony from fishermen, processors, and biologists citing the safety, waste, and quality problems of the halibut and sablefish derbies. And yet the Council's vote to replace the derbies with IFQs has sparked a brush fire that is now raging across Alaska.
I think we have an alternative of many alternatives actually, but basically one of the basic alternatives is trip limits. The Coast Guard said that the only way they can enforce regulations and make sure that people stay honest in the fisheries, particularly out west, is by trip limits. And I believe that. I believe that we ought to go with the Coast Guard on this one and enforce trip limits.
Whatever program we go with will require expanded enforcement effort for them to work. Gear limitations that have been proposed under the Longline system is either limiting the number of skates or limiting the number of hooks, because you're dealing with coiled line, and if you start dealing with hooks and 5,000 to 10,000 hooks, there's a real practical problem of counting them. So that one is a particularly tough issue for enforcement to address. Trip limits, individual trip limits, our current experience with those is they probably take as much enforcement effort, if not more, than IFQs.
We hear comments about alternative management schemes. We've just about exhausted all the alternative management schemes. We're down to trip limits where we regulate the amount a vessel can bring in a 24-hour period. We've, of course, got the area split up into different regions. Some people advocate going to area licensing and so forth, but that doesn't alleviate the tremendous fleet size and the glut of fish coming in at one time. Gear restrictions are put in place to make fishermen more inefficient, and that really isn't a sensible thing to do. We would like to have a more orderly fishery and people as efficient as possible.
People talk about IFQs hurting jobs. If they go to trip limits and if they allow a window of opportunity to catch those fish, maybe a couple days or a couple, 3-4 days, to where everybody gets their limit, jobs will be cut in half, I'm sure. Right away people won't need so many crew because they have more time. And, plus they won't be catching as many fish, won't be giving as big a crew share. People talk about an entry level, that IFQs is going to hurt people trying to get in. If they go to trip limits and institute a moratorium, the people are out for 4 or 5 years, depending on how long they implement the moratorium for.
But it's too late for moratorium. There's just no question about it. It's gone on so long that so many thousands of people, something like 17,000 or 13,000, will qualify under a moratorium for halibut, that it's just too late. That's something like 3 times the most people that have ever fished in 1 year for halibut.
An IFQ system will allow fishermen to go out over a 7 or 8 months period of time and fish whenever they like. They'll have more time to take care of their fish. They'll produce a better product. It'll be a much safer fishery. They won't have to fish in bad weather, so there won't be as much gear loss. There won't be as much dead loss of fish. We'll be able to tally up the quotas as it occurs. It'll be easier from a marketing point of view. Much more of the halibut could go into the fresh market, and the price to fishermen, of course, will increase. That's been the history of the situation in British Columbia. But we'll get away from those 24-hour derby openings, which cause the main management problems. So there's very little negative I can say about IFQs. That'll certainly do a good job. In addition, it will bring higher prices to fishermen.
If the price of fish is worth it, if anybody can afford them, I have good credit. I can buy quota shares and pay them off. Whether they make me any money or not, it should be a good investment for the future. The way it is, there's no future. There's nothing for me.
Limited entry guarantees access to a fishery. It guarantees no fish, and it's an expensive license to go fish. IFQs guarantee fish. They give you ownership to the fish. I, as a limited entry holder, cannot sell any amount of the quota of fish next year. I have to go out and catch some fish to sell fish. But as a recipient of IFQs, you can sell the future IFQ.
The important point here is that nobody owns the fish until they are harvested. There is no guarantees. With IFQs, it'll probably be approximately a 9-month season.
I think that we have privatized the fishing and with limit entry permits, but we allow people to come in, allow people to get out. I think IFQs does the same thing. It's not exactly privatization because people can come and go. It's sort of a free enterprise with, certain, you have to buy into a business and you sell your business.
I am dissatisfied with the windfall profits. I think that those should be resolved. I would not be opposed to non-transferability if there was a way of doing it.
First glance, a non-transferable or non-market system appeals to a lot of people, but unless there's some incentive to give up, some value attached to giving up your quota, why would anybody give them up? Even with the use it or lose it clause, I think you'd see fishermen going along on boats well past when they could actually fish. And that's fine, but how would it affect a new guy trying to get into the fishery? How long would they have to wait for their name to get to the top of some list? They might never get to go fishing.
Regardless of philosophical differences, all Alaskans are concerned about the effects of IFQs on Alaska's coastal communities. Again, images of the future vary widely.
If I was at all smart and I had an IFQ, I'd probably have a bigger boat, but even if I just had this boat, halibut and blackcod keep really good, and the markets are a lot closer down in Seattle, so I would be a fool not to run my fish down to Seattle.
Have most of these people ever run fish to Seattle? They ought to try it sometime. It's a long drag. And the weather, the temperature gets up to 90 degrees and you got ice fish in a hole and you're running 1,000 miles and 1,000 miles back. No, come on folks. You know better than that.
The plan approved by the Council last December has a number of provisions to try and protect the coastal communities and the small boat fleet. First, there's a split between the freezer boats and the catcher boats to try and keep product coming on shore. In other words, any IFQs allocated to boats that have traditionally iced their fish, the catcher boats, have to continue to be marketed fresh or sold on shore. Now, that's 83% of the sablefish quota and 99% of the halibut quota. Additionally, catcher boat IFQs can't be bought by corporations. Only individuals can buy them, and that individual or that person has to be on board the boat when they're catching fish. There's other vessel size classes too. In the sablefish fishery, there's a split at 60 feet, which means quota shares allocated to boats under 60 feet can only be sold to people who are going to continue to catch them on boats under 60 feet. And the halibut fishery has a split at 60 feet plus a split at 35 feet to keep the fleet diverse. Finally, there's caps on the amount of quota any individual can accumulate. That's 1% in the sablefish fishery of the total quota and 0.5% in the halibut fishery. And in Southeast, there's an additional cap, 1% by area, to further restrict consolidation.
Currently, British Columbia has an individual vessel quota program. Traditionally, prior to an IVQ program, 75% of the halibut that were harvested by BC fishermen were landed in British Columbia. In 1991, with the implementation of an IVQ program, 95% of the fish harvested by BC fishermen were sold in BC. Now, that's quite a dramatic increase, and I think that Alaska can expect the same thing to happen.
Anytime you stabilize the fisheries, I think you end up benefiting the people who work in the industry, the processing workers and the captains and crew members around the industry. That's certainly been the history with limited entry in the salmon fisheries. It helped stabilize the economics of the fishery and provide genuine livelihoods for people instead of marginal employment.
The National Marine Fisheries Service has devised a program whereby sablefish and halibut may be landed anywhere in Alaska. The program works through an electronic system similar to credit cards. As long as processing plants or individual fishermen register with the National Marine Fisheries Service and tie into the electronic system, they may purchase IFQ fish.
Another point that needs to be made about coastal communities is in regards to landings. I want to clarify the point that halibut and sablefish can be landed anywhere in the state, provided that the sale is to a registered buyer and advance notification is given. It is not necessary that a community be given primary port status. A primary port merely means that that community will have a National Marine Fisheries Service agent located in their community. But any registered buyer can accept halibut and sablefish.
I'm very concerned about people that are going to circumvent the IFQ system and continue to fish and just illegally put fish on the market.
Some of the other programs that are in existence today lean heavily towards monitoring legally landed catch and inspecting legally landed catch. We've designed our program more to look at the person operating outside the system and to force them into the system. And that's where we've proposed basically a unit of 24 uniformed enforcement personnel who will basically be looking for persons operating outside the system.
Although IFQs require that a new enforcement system be designed, enforcement costs break down to approximately 5 cents per pound of sablefish and halibut harvested under the program. Fishermen testifying before the council have stated their willingness to bear this cost, a taxing system that will involve a change in the Magnuson Act.
My concern then is that we are indeed going to see consolidation, and that consolidation is going to come at the expense of the Alaska resident and the small boat fisherman.
My position on IFQs is that I think it's a great concept for fisheries management. It provides benefits that we need very badly, but in doing so, I'm not willing to sacrifice the right that I had not very many years ago to work my way into these fisheries. And I think that's what the current plan lacks. The Sitka Block Amendment is an effort to address that. It's an effort to maintain a current stratified fleet that we have. We have boats from the size of a Boston whaler to 100-foot freezer longliners. And I think there should always be that diverse fleet here in Alaska.
The Sitka Block Proposal came about in response to concern about how IFQs were going to affect the small boat fleet in the Alaska coastal communities. It doesn't change the amount allocated in the first go-round with IFQs. What it does is form that quota shares that are allocated into blocks and attach them to a license. And no person can have more than 3 licenses when people start to buy or sell in any one area in a year. And what this does is restrict consolidation. It also provides an entry-level fishery because in the initial allocation there's a big percentage of those blocks, 62% in halibut, that are going to be 3,000 pounds or less. And there's very few big blocks, only 5% in halibut that are greater than 30,000 pounds. And the big boats, you know, the big operators, they're going to bid on those bigger blocks. It's not going to be worth it to them to buy a couple of 3,000-pound blocks. So the skiff fishermen, the deckhand, the new guy coming in, they're going to be competing against each other for the small blocks. And there's a lot more of those, so it follows that they'll sell for less per pound.
I had some real concerns about IFQ as it went to the vote because of, I guess, a loophole that allowed maybe somebody to buy too much of a share and control, or maybe several people to control too large a shares, and by therefore, force smaller guys out. And so I more or less was sitting kind of on the fence, figuring that other people would solve this problem. And I think there was quite a few of us that were very reluctant to really go for the IFQ program as such. This development of this program that addresses that, called the Sitka Block Proposal, To me, reading it over and over and trying to address all these issues, I think that now I can stand square behind the IFQ program as long as that proposal is worked in there somehow.
The Sitka Block Proposal guarantees, in essence, that consolidation, although it may occur, can occur to a far lesser degree than it would occur under the system that we've already established. I also believe that the Sitka Block Proposal will help to perpetuate the small boat nature of the fleet. The proposal, as I understand it, sets the stage for a newcomer, a new entrant, to come into the fishery to buy small lots, which that person ought to be able to afford much easier than accumulate a little bit larger of a lot. And so to stair-step their way into the fishery.
The block proposal also contains a provision to help deckhands enter the fisheries. Along with a 3 blocks per person limit is a 4 or 5 block per vessel limit. So the skipper who's reached his personal limit would look for a deckhand with a block in order to increase his vessel's catching capacity. This would give a deckhand that buys a block job security.
It may sound a little convoluted the first time you know that you hear about this Sitka block, or actually that's a poor choice of words. It should be called the Alaska block proposal, because it's for all Alaskans. It's not just for the people in Sitka. All the small communities and shore-based fishing communities will prosper under this plan.
I think we can make the current IFQ program better and less harmful, and still accomplish what we intend to accomplish. Hurt fewer people, particularly little people, and I think we can make it a better program, and I hope the council will try to do that.
Just tell me what would happen without limited entry in a troll fleet, for example. Do you have any idea what would be happening around here in the trolling? Bad enough as it is. I doubt if we'd be a king salmon fishery at all. How's your family?
I'll say, well, what's the weather going to be? And he said, well,